The smoke from the battlefield rose high into the sky as the sound of distant thunder echoed across the valley. It was not real thunder. It was the noise of machines dying after the long war between humans and the alien forces. It would come from beyond the distant stars. The planet's sky was painted in gray light. The air was heavy with the smell of metal and ash. In the middle of that silent wasteland walked a lone human soldier named Rian. His armor was scratched and covered in dust. The rifle on his back was half broken, and his helmet screen kept flickering. Showing fragments of static lines, Rian moved slowly between the broken vehicles and torn banners that lay scattered around. The battle had ended just a few hours ago. He had lost contact with his squad when their transport exploded during retreat. Since then, he had been walking alone, searching for other survivors. He wanted to find anyone, human or not, who might still be alive. The command had ordered everyone to regroup at the southern ridge. The valley was filled with wrecks and strange alien machines that blocked all radio signals. The wind whispered across the burnt ground. Rian kept his weapon ready as he passed the remains of a massive alien walker. Its long legs were twisted like melted steel. The once bright armor of the enemy was now covered in black dust. He could hear small sparks coming from its broken power core. He stepped carefully. Knowing that some of these machines could still explode without warning, the valley was quiet, but the quiet felt wrong. There was no sound of birds or insects, only the faint hum of the dying machines. Rian checked his wrist pad for energy readings. A few weak signals appeared on the screen, flickering near the north side of the field. Most were static echoes, but one seemed real, showing signs of movement. It was weak and fading fast. Rian frowned, then decided to follow it. He moved through piles of fallen soldiers, both human and alien. Some wore familiar armor from Earth's colonies. Others had the smooth silver plates of the alien armies. Rian had fought them for years, but this battle felt different. The enemy had fought harder than usual, as if they were trying to protect something important. He remembered the strange energy pulses that had torn through the air earlier. He had never seen such power before. As he stepped over a ruined transport craft, he heard a sound. It was soft, almost lost under the wind. A faint cry, weak and unsure. He froze and looked around. For a moment, he thought it was only the wind again, but then he heard it once more. A voice, not human, but gentle. Rian followed the sound. His boots pressed into the dust as he climbed over a ridge of metal. The signal on his wrist pad grew stronger. Behind a broken alien pod, he saw movement. Something small and glowing faintly lay on the ground. Rian raised his weapon, ready for danger, but what he saw made him lower it at once. It was an alien woman, lying half inside the wreck. Her body armor was shattered, and her right arm was covered in blood and ash. Her skin was pale silver, shining under the weak sunlight. Her eyes, half open, glowed faint blue. She looked nothing like the soldiers he had fought. Her armor had no weapons attached. Instead, it had strange marks like symbols of science or rank. Rian moved closer carefully. She tried to lift her head but fell back in pain. He could see that she was bleeding heavily from a wound near her side. The ground around her was stained dark. She whispered something in her language. The words were soft and broken, but her voice carried fear and exhaustion. Rian knelt beside her, his hand hovering above his weapon. His training told him not to trust any alien, but his heart said something else. This woman did not look like a soldier. She looked like someone who had been caught in the wrong place. He removed his helmet and spoke softly. "You are hurt. I can help." She blinked at his voice. Her eyes focused on him, then drifted away again. She tried to speak, but could not form the words. Rian checked her pulse with his scanner. Her heartbeat was weak, her blood temperature dropping fast. Without help, she would not survive long. His first thought was to call for medics, but his communicator still had no signal. He looked toward the horizon. The human outpost was many kilometers away across the forest ridge. Rian sighed and began searching the wreck for supplies. He found a small pack near her feet. Inside were strange glass tubes filled with silver liquid. They looked like medical items. He had no idea how to use them, but one tube had a red mark that looked like a symbol for medicine. He opened it and gently poured a small amount over her wound. The liquid shimmered and sealed part of the bleeding area. The woman winced, then breathed a little easier. He spoke again. "You can hear me, right? I am not your enemy. I will not harm you." She stared at him weakly. Her lips moved and she said something that sounded close to a human word. "Help?" Rian was surprised. She knew that word. Maybe she had studied human language before. He nodded quickly. "Yes, help. I will take you to the camp." He looked around once more. The field was still empty, but he knew patrols could come soon. He could not leave her there. Without thinking further, he bent down and lifted her carefully onto his back. Her light frame made the task easier than he expected, but the armor plates were cold against his neck. She groaned softly as he adjusted his grip. Rian tightened the strap around his chest and began walking. The journey across the valley felt endless. Each step sank into soft ash and twisted metal. The woman's breathing was shallow against his shoulder. Rian spoke to her now and then to keep her awake. He asked simple questions, though he knew she could not answer. He said his name so she could hear it. "I am Rian. You are safe now." Sometimes she would whisper strange words, maybe her name, but the sound was too faint to understand. The sky above grew darker as evening came. Rian kept moving, guided by the stars and his training. He knew he had to reach the forest before nightfall. The open ground was dangerous after sunset. Drones from both sides often scanned the area for survivors or targets. Halfway through the march, the woman stirred and pointed weakly toward the east. Rian turned his head to see what she meant. A faint blue glow shimmered near a group of rocks. He moved closer and found a small alien beacon, half buried in the dirt. It was blinking slowly. The woman whispered a few words and touched the device. A small hologram appeared, showing strange symbols and a map. Rian realized it was a route toward some kind of shelter or lab. Maybe that was where she came from. He memorized the direction, then lifted her again and walked on. The forest came into view as night began to fall. The tall trees had silver leaves that reflected the weak moonlight. The air was cooler here, and the smell of smoke faded away. Rian stopped to rest near a fallen tree. He placed the woman gently on the ground and gave her a drink of water from his canteen. She took a small sip, then looked at him with tired eyes. She spoke again, this time more clearly. "Friend." Rian felt something stir inside him. The word sounded strange coming from her, but it was honest. He smiled slightly. "Yes, friend." He checked her wound again. The strange silver medicine had stopped the bleeding, but she needed real medical care soon. He pulled a blanket from his pack and wrapped it around her. As he did, he noticed strange marks on her arm. They were not scars, but lines that glowed softly in the dark, like living veins of light. They pulsed slowly, following her heartbeat. Rian had never seen anything like it. He wondered what kind of species she was and why she was here. The night was quiet except for the soft rustle of the leaves. Rian sat beside her, holding his rifle close. His eyes scanned the shadows. The woman's breathing was steady now. He thought about the war and how it had started. The generals had said the aliens attacked first, but now, seeing her like this, he began to doubt. She did not look like an invader. She looked like someone who had lost everything. He thought of his own family back on Earth. His mother had told him once that mercy was not weakness. It was the courage to see life beyond the uniform. He looked at the alien woman sleeping beside him and felt that truth again. He whispered quietly, "I will not let you die out here." The stars shone brightly above the treetops. The world around them was quiet for the first time since the war began. Rian leaned back against the tree and listened to the soft sound of her breathing. He knew the next day would bring danger. He would have to carry her through enemy lines, through traps and patrols to reach safety. But at that moment, under the calm sky, the battle felt far away. Rian closed his eyes for a short while, his mind full of questions he could not yet answer. Who was she really? Why was she different from the rest? And what secret had brought her to this broken world? He did not know yet, but deep inside, he felt that saving her would change everything, not only for him, but maybe for all of humanity. Morning came slowly to the broken forest. The light of two suns shone through the gray clouds and turned the silver leaves into a sea of soft color. The smell of smoke still lingered from the battle far behind. But here, in the quiet of the trees, the air felt lighter. Rian opened his eyes after a short and restless sleep. The alien woman was still beside him, her breathing calm and steady. The strange glow on her arm had dimmed, but was still visible under the skin. Like small rivers of light, he checked her wound again. The healing liquid he used last night had sealed part of it, but she had lost much blood. Her body was weak, and her lips were pale. Rian gave her another sip of water, then packed his few supplies. He looked toward the north. The map shown by her beacon was still in his memory. The human outpost was in that direction, though it would take more than a day to reach it. Between here and the base lay the hills and broken roads of the forest zone. Enemy scouts sometimes searched this area for survivors. If they found them, neither he nor the woman would survive. Rian lifted his pack and then bent down beside her. "We have to move," he said softly. "You are not safe here." The woman opened her eyes weakly. She looked at him, trying to understand. Rian pointed toward the trees and made a walking motion with his hand. She nodded slowly. When she tried to rise, pain crossed her face, and she fell back. Rian shook his head. "No, I will carry you." He lifted her carefully onto his back again. Her arms hung loosely around his shoulders and her head rested near his neck. Her skin felt cool, almost metallic, but her heartbeat was faintly warm. Rian tightened his grip and began walking through the forest path. The ground was uneven, full of roots and rocks. Every step made his muscles burn, but he kept going. For hours, Rian moved through the forest without stopping. The light above shifted between the tall trees, making strange patterns on the ground. The woman sometimes spoke small words in her language, but he could not understand. Once she whispered his name. The sound was quiet, almost unsure, but it made him smile a little. He felt she was trying to trust him. As the day grew brighter, Rian noticed smoke in the distance. He stopped and hid behind a large tree. Through the leaves, he saw a group of alien drones scanning the area. They hovered above the trees, searching for heat signals. Rian quickly pulled out a small blanket made of thermal fabric and covered himself and the woman. The drones passed by slowly, their red lights sweeping across the ground. One of them stopped and turned toward the tree. Rian held his breath. The woman, sensing the danger, remained silent. After a long moment, the drone turned away and followed the others, toward the west. Only when the sound faded did Rian move again. He let out a slow breath and looked up at the woman. "We are safe for now." She blinked weakly and whispered a word that sounded like gratitude. Rian nodded and continued walking. By noon, they reached a small stream that cut through the forest. The water was clear and cool. Rian set her down beside it and helped her drink. He washed the dirt from her face and arms. The silver in her skin shimmered under the sunlight. It looked almost beautiful, like living metal mixed with flesh. Rian wondered again who she truly was. He had seen many kinds of aliens in the war, but none like her. Most were tall, armored, and filled with anger. She was different. Her face looked calm, even when in pain. Her voice carried no hate. Rian filled his canteen and looked at her. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked slowly, pointing at her chest, then at himself. "Name Rian." She looked at him and touched her own chest weakly. "Myra," she said softly. Rian smiled. "Mira, that is your name." She nodded faintly, and her eyes closed again from exhaustion. Rian repeated her name quietly as he packed up. It felt right to know who she was. She was no longer just an injured alien. She was Myra, someone with a voice and a story. He lifted her once more and followed the stream downstream, hoping it would lead to the old road that connected the valley to the human base. The forest grew thicker. Strange glowing plants covered the path. Some of them reacted to his touch, closing like hands when he brushed past them. The sound of small creatures echoed from the branches above. Rian kept moving, his focus sharp. Every sound could be danger, but for now, the forest seemed peaceful. Later in the afternoon, Dark clouds gathered in the sky. Thunder rolled across the hills, followed by light rain. The drops hit his armor and rolled down his face. The temperature fell quickly. Rian found shelter under a wide rock ledge and set Mira down carefully. He removed his pack and used a small energy lamp to light the space. The rain grew heavier outside, filling the air with a steady rhythm. Rian sat near the entrance, watching the falling water. Myra stirred slightly and opened her eyes. She looked at the rain and then at him. "Cold," she whispered. Rian nodded and took off his outer jacket. He wrapped it around her shoulders. "Better?" he asked. She gave a small nod. Her hands trembled as she touched the jacket's fabric. She looked at him again and said, "You fight?" Rian hesitated, then answered slowly. "Yes, I am a soldier." He pointed to his armor. "Human army." Myra's expression changed slightly. She said something in her language that he could not understand, but her tone was soft, not afraid. Then she pointed at herself and said, "No fight, work." Rian frowned slightly. "Work? What kind of work?" She thought for a moment and made gestures with her hands, drawing circles in the air and pointing at the sky. Rian guessed she was trying to say she was a scientist or an engineer. He nodded. "Science. You study things." Her eyes brightened a little as she repeated the word, "science." Rian smiled faintly. "So you are not a soldier." She shook her head weakly. Then her eyes grew sad and she turned her gaze toward the ground. Rian did not ask more. He could see there was pain in her memory. Whatever had happened, she had not been part of the fight by choice. The rain lasted until evening. When it stopped, Rian stood up and checked his gear. He had little food left, but enough for another day. He gave Mira a small piece of ration bread and some water. She took it slowly, chewing with effort. Rian looked at her glowing marks again. They were brighter now, pulsing like slow waves. He wondered if it was part of her healing process. When the path outside became less slippery, Rian lifted her again and continued their journey. The forest grew darker as the sun set. Strange lights appeared among the trees, moving like fireflies but larger. Mira looked at them with calm eyes. She whispered something that sounded like the name of the lights. Rian did not understand, but he felt safe for some reason. As if the forest itself was guiding them. They walked through the night. Rian's legs felt heavy, but he did not stop. Every few hours, Mira would whisper small directions, pointing to safer paths or quiet areas. It seemed she knew this land better than he did. Sometimes she warned him before a drone passed overhead. Her hearing and sense of energy were far sharper than human. With her help, they avoided detection many times. Near midnight, they reached an open ridge. From there, Rian could see far across the land. The battlefield smoke still rose faintly in the distance. He saw flashes of light from ships patrolling the sky. Beyond the dark hills lay the route to the outpost. He looked down at Myra. She was barely conscious now. Her skin had turned even paler, and her breathing was slow. He knew she needed real medical help soon. He found a small cave near the ridge and decided to rest there until sunrise. Inside, he laid her down gently and started a small fire using a plasma spark. The warmth filled the space. He looked at her face, peaceful in sleep, and wondered again what had brought her here. She was not an enemy. She was not like the soldiers who had tried to destroy his team. Maybe she held a secret that could change everything. Maybe she was proof that not all of her kind wanted war. Rian took out his small communicator again. The signal was still too weak. He could only send short-range messages, but he recorded a brief note. "This is Corporal Rian, stranded north of Sector 9. Found one living alien. Female. Not hostile. Moving toward base. Will attempt contact again tomorrow." He saved the message for later transmission and then leaned back. Myra moved in her sleep, murmuring words that sounded like sorrow. Rian reached out and held her hand gently. Her fingers were light and cool. Her pulse was weak but steady. He felt a strange sense of responsibility for her. She was no longer just a mission. She was someone he had promised to save. The firelight flickered across the walls. The rain outside had stopped, and the forest sang softly with the sound of night creatures. Rion's eyes grew heavy, but he stayed awake, watching over her. His thoughts drifted to the war again. He had joined to protect his people, believing the aliens were monsters. But now, seeing Mira, he realized how little he knew. If she was a scientist, maybe others like her had tried to make peace. Maybe the war had begun because of fear and misunderstanding. He looked at her again and whispered softly, "You will live, Mira. I will get you home." The fire crackled softly as the night grew colder. In the silence of that cave, two beings from different worlds rested side by side, both carrying the weight of their broken worlds. When morning light returned, it touched the cave walls with gold. Rion rose, stretched his tired limbs, and prepared for another day of travel. He glanced at Mira, who opened her eyes slowly and looked at him with a faint smile. She whispered one word in clear human speech. "Thank." The morning light touched the forest with soft gold. The air was cool and fresh after the night rain. Rion walked through the tall trees with Myra on his back. Her weight felt lighter now, but her body was still weak. He could feel the slow rhythm of her breathing against his shoulder. Every time she exhaled, a small spark of warmth spread across his neck. It reminded him that she was alive, and that was enough to keep him going. The forest path became rocky and steep. Rion stepped carefully, avoiding the roots and sharp stones. The sound of birds had returned, and somewhere nearby, a stream sang quietly through the hills. He stopped for a moment to rest and let Mira drink some water. Her eyes opened a little wider now. The glow in her veins was softer, but steady. When she looked at him, her gaze carried both pain and calmness. Rion said softly, "We are close to the ridge. From there, I can call for help." Myra looked around and spoke a few words in her language. Rion could not understand them, but her tone sounded worried. She pointed toward the sky as if warning him about something above. Rion looked up. A faint shape moved high in the clouds, silent and gray. It was a scout ship, scanning the forest. He quickly pulled Mira beneath a fallen log and covered them with branches. The ship passed over slowly, a beam of blue light sweeping the trees. When it faded away, he let out a quiet breath. Myra whispered, "Enemy." Added, "Yes, enemy. They are searching for survivors." She closed her eyes for a moment, then said softly, "They not want me alive." Rion looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "I run from them. They shoot me. I know something they hide." Her words came slow, broken, but clear enough for him to understand. Rion stared at her. He had guessed she was not a soldier, but now he realized there was more. "You said you were a scientist," he said. "What kind of science?" She looked away for a long time before answering. "Life science. Study body. Study blood." Rion's mind raced. "You study biology?" She nodded weakly. "Yes. Human and my kind. We same in part. Not enemy in heart. Same origin." "Long time." Rion froze. He thought he had misheard her. "Same origin? You mean humans and your people are connected?" Mira's voice was faint but steady. "Yes. Long ago. One star, one seed. Split in two worlds. My people know truth. Empire, hide it. Empire want war to keep power." Rion felt his heartbeat quicken. "You have proof?" She looked at him with tired eyes. "Data in crystal. I carry it. If they find me, they destroy it. If you help me, maybe peace." She reached weakly for her belt, where a small round device was attached. Rion took it carefully and examined it. It looked like a smooth stone made of blue glass. Inside it, lights pulsed like tiny stars. He turned it over in his hands, realizing it must hold some kind of recorded data. "This is why they were chasing you," he said. "Because you tried to show this to someone." Mira nodded again. "I send message to human command before war start. Empire block it. Say I betray." Rion sat back in silence. He had fought for years, believing the aliens wanted to destroy humanity. Now he was holding proof that someone among them had tried to stop it. He looked at her again. So you risked your life to tell the truth. She smiled weakly. Truth make change, but truth is danger. Rian placed the crystal safely in his pouch. Then I will protect this. And I will protect you. Myra's eyes softened. Why you help? She asked quietly. We fight your kind. Rian shook his head. Because you are not fighting now. You are someone who tried to stop the war. That makes you worth saving. She looked at him for a long time, as if searching for something in his eyes. Then she nodded slowly and rested her head against his shoulder again. Rian stood and began walking once more. The forest grew darker as they entered the high ridge. Thick mist covered the path, and the air turned cold. Strange blue moss glowed on the rocks, lighting their way. Rian's boots slipped on wet ground, but he kept going. Every step echoed softly through the mist. He felt the weight of the crystal pressing against his side. It was more than just data now. It was hope. By afternoon, they reached a wide cliff that overlooked the valley below. From here, Rian could see the distant lights of the human outpost, still several kilometers away. He sat down and rested Myra beside him. She looked out at the land with quiet eyes. The view stretched far and wide, full of ruined machines and black scars from explosions. This world dying, she said softly. Rian nodded. Yes, too much war. Myra turned to him. Your people and mine both lose if war not stop. He looked at her, his mind filled with questions. Why would your leaders hide this truth? She answered slowly. Empire rule by fear. They tell us humans are danger. But real danger is greed. They use war to keep control. Rian sighed deeply. That sounds too familiar. Our leaders said the same thing about your people. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the wind move across the ruined valley. Rian felt a strange sense of peace beside her. Despite the war, despite their differences, there was something simple and real between them. They both wanted the same thing, an end to the fighting. As the sun began to set, Rian decided they needed to find shelter for the night. He spotted a cluster of rocks below the ridge that looked like an old bunker. It was built into the hillside, half hidden by vines. He carried Myra down carefully and entered the structure. Inside, the air was stale, but the walls were strong. Old human markings covered the metal panels. It must have been a forward base used at the start of the campaign. Rian activated his small lamp and looked around. He found a few old crates and a working power cell. With some effort, he started a small heater. Warm air filled the room. Myra looked at the walls with interest. Tracing the human writing with her fingers, "You build strong," she said quietly. Rian smiled a little. "We try. Sometimes too much strength, not enough wisdom." He helped her sit near the heater. She leaned back against the wall, her face pale but calm. After a few minutes, she began to speak again, her words slow but clear. "Long ago, my people send ships to explore stars. They find humans. Humans still young. We watch from far. We want to guide, but some say no. Some say let them grow alone. After many years, we lost contact. When Empire arise, they fear humans. They say humans will one day challenge them. So they start lies. They change records. They erase truth." Rian listened carefully. "So your empire created fear to control both sides?" She nodded. "Yes. When I find old data about our link, I try send message to your leaders. Empire, stop it. They send soldiers to take my work. Run. They shoot me." Rian felt anger burn inside him. All this death, all this destruction, just because they wanted to hide a connection. She looked at him with sad eyes. "Power blind many. But now you know. You carry truth." He looked at the crystal again. "This data could end the war if we can show it to the right people." Myra nodded faintly. "If they believe?" Rian sat beside her in silence. The heater hummed softly. He thought of all the soldiers who had died, all the cities burned, all because of fear and lies. He looked at her and said, "Then I will make them believe. I swear it." Her lips curved into a small smile. "You are a brave human," he chuckled quietly. "No, I am just tired of fighting the wrong war. They rested for a while. Myra's breathing became easier near the warmth. Rian used a first aid pack he found in the bunker to clean her wound again. The healing liquid he used before had almost sealed it. She would survive if she got real care soon. He made a small bed from cloth and armor plates and helped her lie down. When she closed her eyes, he sat near the entrance, holding his rifle ready. The night outside was quiet. Stars filled the sky like silver dust. Rian looked at them and wondered which of those stars was her home. He imagined her people living under calm skies before the Empire's rule. Maybe they were not so different from humans after all. When he turned back, Mira was watching him quietly. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "You miss home?" Rian nodded. "Yes, I miss it every day." She smiled weakly. "You will see again." When this ended, he wanted to believe her. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope that maybe the war could end. Maybe humans and her kind could stand together. He looked at her and said, "Rest now. Tomorrow we move to the base. Then we will show them the truth." She closed her eyes, whispering one word. Together, Rian stayed awake most of the night, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the gentle sound of her breathing. His thoughts were heavy but clear. He had entered the battle as a soldier, ready to kill. Now he carried a secret that could save both sides. As dawn approached, he packed his gear again. Mira woke slowly, her strength slightly returned. The light from the rising suns touched her silver skin, making it glow softly. She looked at him with calm eyes and said, "We go now."
Ow.
Rian nodded. "Yes, we go." He lifted her onto his back once more and stepped out into the morning light. Behind them, the old bunker grew quiet again. Ahead lay danger and hope. Rian walked steadily, his mind fixed on one goal: to reach the base and reveal the truth that could change the fate of two worlds. The forest was alive with soft rustling as Rian stepped carefully, Mira still on his back. Her body was lighter now, but every step reminded him of her weakness. The air smelled of wet earth and moss. The light of the two suns was faint, filtered through thick mist. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and Rian knew the enemy could appear at any moment. They had to move fast. Mira reached weakly and pointed toward a narrow path between two hills. Her glowing veins pulsed softly. Rian realized she knew a shortcut through the forest that would take them closer to the human outpost. He nodded silently and began to follow the trail. The ground was uneven, covered with roots and sharp stones. Rian stumbled once, and Myra groaned in pain. He steadied himself and whispered, "Hold on. We are safe for now." She closed her eyes and rested against his shoulder. Hours passed and the sun rose higher. The forest became warmer, but danger had not disappeared. In the distance, Rian saw faint sparks of light moving between the trees. His heart tightened. Enemy drones were searching the forest, scanning for heat and movement. He ducked behind a fallen tree and lowered Mira to the ground. Her eyes opened and she whispered a few words in her language. Rian could not understand, but the tone was warning. The drones hovered above, their red lights sweeping across the forest. Rian held his breath. The sound of the machines filled the air like a storm. One drone stopped above them and rotated slowly. Rian pressed Myra closer to the ground. The drone's beam passed over them without detecting them. After a tense minute, it moved on. Rian exhaled and lifted Mira again. "We need to reach the ridge before they search further," he said softly. The journey became harder as the hills grew steeper. Rian climbed carefully, feeling the strain in his legs. Myra's hands rested lightly on his shoulders, her small voice occasionally warning him of loose stones or sharp branches. Her senses were sharper than his, and he trusted her instinct. By afternoon, the forest opened into a small valley filled with strange glowing plants. Some had large leaves that reflected light like mirrors. Others had small flowers that pulsed faintly. Rian could see the path leading upward toward a rocky cliff. It would take them out of the valley and provide a better view of the surrounding area. He stopped for a moment to let Mira rest. She drank from her canteen, her fingers trembling slightly. Rian studied her face. Despite everything, there was determination in her eyes. She had survived an Empire attack, crossed a battlefield. Now she trusted a human soldier. "We are almost there," he said. "Just a little further, then we can see the outpost." Mira nodded, then touched her belt and pointed toward the small crystal. "Showed danger," she whispered. Rian realized she meant the crystal could help them hide. He looked at it carefully. The small device emitted a faint glow. He held it up, and a small pulse of light spread outward. The sensors in the area seemed to falter. He smiled faintly. "Good. We can move faster now." They continued their climb. The rocks were sharp and wet from the earlier rain. Every step required balance and focus. Rian adjusted his grip on Myra to prevent her from slipping. The sun cast long shadows, and he knew they were running out of daylight. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed from the valley below. Trees shook, and dust rose into the air. Rian froze. He could hear shouting in the distance, alien voices carried by the wind. Scouts had found another human patrol. He realized the drones might change their search pattern. "We must move faster," he whispered to Mira. She nodded, her glowing veins pulsing brighter. She reached out and pointed to a narrow cave entrance on the cliff. "Safe," she whispered. Rian carried her quickly toward the cave. The path was treacherous, but they reached it without being detected. Inside, the air was cool and dry. The walls were smooth rock, with faint markings that looked like ancient alien writing. Rian set Mira down gently and lit a small lamp. "Rest here," he said. "I will check the area." Mira nodded weakly. She leaned against the wall, watching him with faint curiosity. Rian stepped outside the cave. The cliff gave him a clear view of the surrounding forest. He saw movement in the valley. Enemy scouts were spreading out, searching for survivors. He counted 4 drones and 2 patrol units on the ground. They had not noticed him yet. Rian planned their escape carefully. They could not fight all of them. They needed speed and stealth. He returned to the cave and explained his plan. "We go down the east slope," he said. "The drones cannot reach there easily, and the patrols will not expect us." Myra listened carefully. She whispered a few words and pointed toward the slope. Rian nodded. "You know this land better than I do." They waited until the sun was lower, casting long shadows across the forest. Then Rian lifted Mira once more and began moving down the slope. The path was steep and rocky. His legs burned with the effort. Mira whispered warnings about loose stones and falling branches. Her voice was soft but urgent. Halfway down, they heard a distant alarm. Rian froze. Enemy sensors had detected movement. Red lights flashed across the trees below. The patrols were moving toward them. "Faster," Rian whispered. Mira pointed to a group of large rocks ahead. "Hide," she said. They slid behind the rocks, just as 2 patrols passed by. Rian held his breath, feeling Myra's small hands resting lightly on his back. The patrols continued down the slope, unaware of their presence. Rian exhaled quietly. "We need to keep moving," he said. Mira nodded and pointed toward another path that led deeper into the forest. They moved quickly, avoiding open areas. Every step was calculated, every branch and root carefully avoided. The forest seemed alive, and Rian felt it guiding them. As night fell, they reached a small river. The water was fast and clear. Rian set Mira down and helped her drink. She shivered slightly from exhaustion and cold. He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and helped her rest on the bank. "We must cross," Rian said. "The outpost is just beyond." Mira looked at the river and then at him. She touched her belt and made a small glowing pulse. The light spread across the water, creating a temporary shield that blocked heat and movement sensors. Rian understood. The crystal could hide them from detection for a short time. He picked her up again and moved slowly through the shallow water. The current was strong, but he kept his balance. Mira whispered words of encouragement, and her glowing veins pulsed steadily. They reached the far side safely. The forest beyond the river was dark and quiet. Rian led them along a narrow path, keeping his eyes and ears open. He could hear distant sounds of conflict, but they were far enough away not to be dangerous. Mira rested lightly against his back, trusting him completely. By midnight, they reached an old human supply shelter hidden among the trees. Rian checked the structure carefully. It was empty, but intact. He placed Mira down gently and helped her lie on a bed of cloth and armor plates. The crystal rested safely in his pouch. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow, we reach the base." Mira closed her eyes, her body relaxing for the first time since the battlefield. She whispered softly, "Safe. Thanks." Rian stayed awake through the night, watching over her. He thought of the journey ahead. The base was still far, and enemy forces were everywhere. But he felt hope. Mira carried knowledge that could change the war. He carried her life. Together, they had survived more than most could imagine. The forest was quiet under the stars. The distant lights of enemy patrols flashed occasionally. Rian adjusted his rifle and checked the path outside. Every moment was a risk, but he was ready. Myra's life and the secret she carried were more important than his own safety. When dawn came, Rian packed their supplies and lifted Myra onto his back again. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "Go," she whispered. Rian nodded. "Yes, we go together." As they stepped into the light, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Ahead lay danger, pursuit, and hope. They would face every challenge, for the crystal carried the truth, and they were determined to survive and deliver it. The forest thinned as Rian and Myra approached the high ridge that led to the human outpost. The rising sun painted the horizon in soft gold, reflecting off the tops of the distant buildings. Rian paused for a moment to take in the view. The outpost was fortified with tall walls and several watchtowers. Soldiers moved along the ramparts, their movements steady but alert. Smoke rose faintly from the lower buildings, and he knew the human engineers were repairing equipment from recent attacks. Mira, resting lightly against his back, stirred and whispered, "Home?" Rian shook his head gently. "Not yet. Almost there. Stay calm." She nodded and closed her eyes again, conserving strength. Every step he took was careful. The last few kilometers had been treacherous. Enemy scouts could still be nearby, and they could not afford to be seen before reaching the outpost. The glowing crystal in his pack pulsed softly, reminding him of the importance of the mission. They moved down the ridge using hidden paths through rocks and trees. Mira occasionally pointed out safer routes or areas where enemy sensors might detect them. Her instincts were sharper than any humans. Rian trusted her. Completely as they approached a shallow stream at the edge of the forest, Rian stopped. The sound of running water was soothing, but he remained alert. He placed Mira carefully on the ground and let her drink. Her hands were cold, but her eyes held determination. She touched the crystal gently, sending a small pulse of light. It shimmered across the water, creating a protective shield. Rian watched the river for a moment and then carried her across. The outpost came into view shortly after. The walls were strong, but the gates were open, signaling that patrols could be nearby. Rian scanned the area. 2 human soldiers were walking near the main entrance, and several automated turrets scanned the sky. He waited until the soldiers were distracted, and then moved quickly toward the gate. Mira, still weak, whispered softly, "Careful." Rian nodded. "Always." They passed through the gate unnoticed, using a side path that led to a storage area near the center of the outpost. He placed Mira down gently and checked her wounds again. The small healing liquid had kept the bleeding stopped, but she needed real medical care soon. Rian approached the nearest communications officer. "I need to reach the commander." "This is urgent," he said. The officer looked at him with surprise. "A lone soldier with an alien? What is going on?" "Not an enemy. She carries information. It is important for the war." "Please let me through," Rian insisted. Showing the crystal, the officer hesitated, but then saw the glow and the pulse of energy from the device. He nodded and motioned Rian to follow. They moved quickly through the corridors until they reached the commander's office. Commander Varric, a tall man with graying hair, looked up as Rian entered. "Corporal Rian, what is this?" Rian set Mira down gently. "Sir, this is Mira. She is a scientist from the alien empire." She carries data that proves humans and her people share a common origin. She tried to send this message before the war started. The Empire tried to stop her. I brought her here to show the truth. The commander's eyes widened. You brought an alien into the base? Yes, sir. But she is not hostile. She wants peace. The data she carries can end this war, Rian explained. Mira stepped forward slowly, supported by Rian. She held up the crystal, and the lights inside it pulsed steadily. Truth, she said softly, her voice clear. Peace. Commander Varek studied her closely. He motioned to his aides to bring over a secure terminal. They connected the crystal to the system. Holographic images and data appeared in the air. Charts, star maps, and genetic patterns showed the connection between humans and Mira's people. Every officer in the room leaned forward, studying the information with disbelief. This proves a shared origin, Myra said softly, pointing to the genetic patterns. We are connected. War is based on lies. The room was silent for a long moment. Commander Varek looked at Rian, then at Mira. If this is true, the implications are enormous. We may have been fighting the wrong enemy all this time, Rian nodded. That is why I brought her here. So you can see for yourself, Mira added. Empires lie to control. Fear make war. Truth bring choice. Peace is possible, officers whispered among themselves. Some were doubtful, some amazed, but everyone could see the evidence floating in the holographic display. Commander Varek finally spoke. We will verify this information immediately. Prepare medical support for her. She has risked everything to bring this knowledge to us. Medics rushed in to tend to Myra. They checked her wounds, cleaned them, and gave her a proper healing treatment. She closed her eyes in relief as warmth and care spread through her body. Rian stayed beside her, watching carefully. Her face relaxed for the first time in days. The news of Mira's discovery spread quickly throughout the base. Soldiers and scientists gathered to witness the holographic records. The genetic patterns, star charts, and historical evidence showed undeniable proof that humans and her people had once shared a common world. The war, fueled by fear and lies, now appeared senseless. Commander Varek called for a ceasefire message to be sent to all field units. Orders were given to stop attacks and investigate the Empire's leadership. Communications with Myra's people would be established to confirm the truth. The possibility of peace was now real. Rian watched Mira as she rested. Her silver skin glowed softly under the medical lights. She looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you. You carry my life, my hope." He smiled faintly. You carried more than hope. You carried the truth. And together, we made it here. Outside the base, patrols paused their movements. Drones stopped scanning. Soldiers lowered their weapons. The atmosphere shifted. For the first time in years, both humans and aliens could imagine a future without constant fighting. As the day continued, Mira recovered more strength. She walked slowly with Rian beside her. The medics helped her adjust to her surroundings. She showed the scientists and commanders how the data in the crystal could be shared securely. Plans were made to communicate with her people, explaining the truth and offering a path toward unity. Rian thought about the journey they had taken. From the battlefield, through forests, across rivers, and past enemy patrols, they had survived countless dangers. Every step had been a test of endurance, courage, and trust. He looked at Myra, who smiled faintly despite her exhaustion. You know, said quietly, I thought I was just carrying you, but you were carrying all of this too. The chance to stop the war. Mira touched his hand lightly, and you carry the courage to make it happen. In the evening, the commander called for a meeting with the top officers. Rian and Mira were present. The officers studied the data and debated next steps. Mira explained the history of her people and the lies spread by the Empire. Every point she made was backed by the crystal. Slowly, skepticism turned into belief. Plans were made to contact the Empire's forces and encourage their cooperation. The ceasefire would be enforced until both sides agreed to negotiate. As night fell, the base quieted. Soldiers rested. Drones patrolled cautiously but did not attack. Rianne and Myra stood near the edge of the base, looking out at the stars. The distant battlefield was still scarred, but the first glimmers of hope shone across the valley. Myra looked up at the sky. "Stars same," she said softly. "We once looked at same stars. Now we see again together." Rianne nodded. "Yes, now we see. Now we have choice." She smiled faintly, touching the crystal. "Truth bring choice. Choice bring peace." Rianne placed a hand on her shoulder. "And we will protect it. Together." The next day, official communications with her people began. Messages carried by secure channels confirmed Mira's story. Leaders of both sides were shocked but listened. Her work became the foundation for negotiations. Soldiers lowered weapons. Scientists shared knowledge. Humanity and her people began to imagine a future where they could work side by side. Instead of fighting, Mira recovered fully with the help of human medics. Her glowing veins returned to a gentle pulse. She walked through the base with confidence, explaining the data and answering questions. Soldiers and civilians alike watched her with respect. She had risked everything for truth, and that bravery became a bridge between two worlds. Rianne often walked beside her. Sometimes he asked simple questions about her home. Sometimes they shared silence, watching the stars together. He realized that in carrying her across the forest, he had also carried hope for everyone. Every danger they had faced, every step he had taken, had led to this moment of possibility. Finally, the commander addressed all personnel. He spoke of courage, truth, and unity. He praised Mira and Rianne for their actions. He announced that peace talks would begin with the Empire. The soldiers cheered quietly. It was not a celebration, but a recognition of the hard journey and the hope now alive. Mira looked at Rianne. "You carry more than my life," she said softly. "You carry the hope of two worlds." He smiled and replied, "And you carry the courage to make it real." The stars shone above the base, brighter than they had in years. The battlefield was quiet. For the first time, the possibility of peace felt real. Humanity and Myra's people could now imagine a future together. The war had taught many lessons, but the greatest was clear. Courage, compassion, and truth could change everything. Rianne and Mira stood side by side, looking at the horizon. The sun rose over the valley.